Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Welcome, dear friends, for this Wednesday night Sutta talk at the Empty Cloud Monastery. We are returned now to the library studio space at the monastery, which has recently been a little bit redecorated and remodeled. I have a very beautiful hope for this room. I'm thinking of this as being, I could call this the Dhamma Savana Sala, the room for learning the Dhamma. The talk that I have tonight is not the one that's on the screen at the minute, but it's 148, the Chachaka Sutta, the sutta about the 6 sets of 6. The reason why I'm bringing this sutta to you is that it's an expansion of the idea that's given in brief within the Satipatthana Sutta. So these days we are looking into the Satipatthana, and from the contemplation of feelings, I was led over to the part of the contemplation of Dhammas about the 6 senses, because feelings, Vedana, is a part of this teaching here. So let's just take a look here. This is in Majjhima Nikaya 10, Satipatthana Sutta, within the Dhammanupassana, the contemplation of the Dhammas, and the Ayatana Pamba, which is the contemplation of the sense fields. The Buddha said, a mendicant meditates by observing an aspect of the Dhamma with respect to the 6 interior and exterior sense fields. How? It's when a mendicant understands, this is pajanati, so that's meaning direct understanding. When a mendicant understands the eye, sights, and the fetter that arises dependent on both of these, they understand how the fetter that has not arisen comes to arise, how the arisen fetter comes to be abandoned, and how the abandoned fetter does not rise again in the future. So this fetter, which is called samyojana, can have a general meaning of whatever is blocking our way, tying us down, keeping us going around and around in samsara, preventing us from realizing liberation. So, like just as the eye, ear and sounds, the nose and smells, the tongue and tastes, the body and touches, and the mind and ideas. So that's, now I'm going to switch to a different screen. Okay, here we go. This is 6 by 6, or the 6 sets of six, the Chachaka Sutta. Cha means 6. Chaka means a set of 6. Chachaka, 6 sets of 6. The Buddha begins this sutta directly, and he says, "Mendicants, I shall teach you the Dhamma that's good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, meaningful and well phrased. I shall reveal a spiritual practice that's entirely full and pure, namely the 6 sets of 6. This is a very unique statement. We have seen other speakers referring to the Dhamma taught by the Buddha with this wonderful praise, saying that it's the Dhamma that's good in the beginning, the middle, and the end, meaningful and well phrased, entirely full and pure. But this is a unique instant where the Buddha speaks of what he's about, the Dhamma that he's about to explain in these terms. So this is to emphasize the importance of this teaching. Now, he comes. The 6 interior sense fields should be understood. The 6 exterior sense fields should be understood. The 6 classes of consciousness should be understood. The 6 classes of contact should be understood. The 6 classes of feeling should be understood. The 6 classes of craving should be understood. You might quickly notice that this is several of the teachings, the Dhammas, that are explained in the Buddha's teaching, Paticcasamuppada, the teaching about causation and the arising of dukkha. His teaching about the perpetuation of the cycle of rebirth. And the interior and exterior sense fields are the ayatana. In the middle of the dependent origination, you have the salayatana. So that's the sense basis. And then the consciousness, in this case, is referring to the consciousness which is arising at the gate of each one of the 6 senses, which is the knowing, the faculty that cognizes what is arising at the 6 senses. That's the initial cognition before the further on mental processes happen related to feelings, craving, or the whole process of perception and proliferation of thoughts and ideas. So in the dependent origination, consciousness is given at a different spot on the cycle. When it's saying that dependent on sankharas arises vijnana, dependent on previous karmic formations, there arises consciousness. Those in that teaching, that's referring in a summary to the entire process of the life cycle, the arising of beings, and the consciousness based on all of the causations that happened in previous times that caused the arising of the birth of an individual. Here it's, in this case, it's showing in more detail where the consciousness arises. You'll see later on that this exact, precise contemplation of where the arising, where the knowing comes to be, phenomenon, everything we experience in this life is what we know, things that can be known, things that can be experienced by us. All of it is coming as a result of the five physical senses or the mind as a sense base. And one can mindfully contemplate when we're doing the satipatthana, when we're practicing mindfulness, we can direct our awareness to try to see as closely as possible where that knowing is first arising in a connection to that the sense contact. And then subsequent to that arises feeling. It says in the dependent arising, depending on contact arises feeling, dependent on feeling arises craving. So feeling is the first initial way in which an individual evaluates the experience or the phenomenon that's come into our awareness, and in particular, evaluating as pleasant, unpleasant, or in between, as that which is in the subsequent proliferation is good for us, liked by us, loved by us, wanted by us, or that which is painful to us, disliked, rejected, or hated by us, or that which is not clear whether it's one or the other, or just kind of like no feeling in particular, but that is a feeling, that in between feeling, that neutral feeling is still a kind of a Vedana, and in particular for an uninstructed person, that neutral Vedana is related to ignoring or not noticing, not being so, having a clear response. Feeling in and of itself does not necessarily, to have a feeling is not a skillful or unskillful kamma. So it is not an action that is resulting in perpetuating the cycle of rebirth. So you shouldn't blame yourself if you have a pleasant feeling or you have an unpleasant feeling. A feeling is just a feeling. But then when the craving arises, this is what is the actual fuel. So the feeling is like the match that lights the bonfire of craving. So now that was his summary. Now the Buddha describes the 6 interior sense fields, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. That's not referring to like the physical of the eyeball or the physical of the outer ear, but it's referring to the function of the ear as connecting to the nervous system and the brain, and ultimately to the mind, as how material light is able to be cognized as a visible object. Even today, I think the science, we know that there are rods and cones, and there are different kind of like receptor neurons located in the eye or in in the inner ear, in the nose, and on the skin, and so forth like that. But how exactly the brain takes in the pattern that's coming through those sense receptors, the rods and cones in the eye, and converting that into the experience of seeing an object is not fully described, but we know that it happens. So it's the faculty that we have within our material body, which is able to produce these experiences, these phenomena, what you can see, hear, touch, taste, and so forth. Now, ayatana, the sense field is called an ayatana. That is something you could say a home, or like a home base. So it's used in several different general ways with that general sense. So the home for the eye is a visible object. So the visible objects find their home with the eye sense. So usually if there's a sound, most people are not able to see a sound with their eyes. Most people are not able to hear a visible object with their ears. Each sense is only connected to one particular type of external phenomenon. There is something called synesthesia, where for some individuals, it's like the wires are crossed somewhere in the brain. And when they hear music, for example, or when they hear sounds, they will see shimmering lights as a result of the sound waves sometimes are crossing over into the nerve system that's normally connected with the eyes. It's said that the composer Debussy, he wrote impressionist music, which is all very, kind of, I don't know, mysterious like that. And as he was writing this music, he was creating a light show for himself. Yeah. The mind sense, manas, is the mind. And the mind is different than all the other sense fields in that it's able to cognize the other 5 senses. So the mind is able to bring a meaning to the object. So with the eye, and the eye base is just like a pattern of light. And the manas, the mind, might say, that's a person, or that's a friend, that's an enemy, that's a book, that's a stop sign. And they can understand the meaning of those things, understand the significance of them. So that's mind is able to integrate from several different senses together and to put them together into a meaning. Mind is also able to recollect something that was seen before, and in a way can initiate a fabrication. So if you think of your mother, you might get a picture in your mind's eye of your mother when you think of her. So that's because of the memory. So the memory is also happening in the mind. So this should be understood. The exterior are the corresponding external phenomenon, which is coming together with the eye. And then the consciousness. Here's the description of consciousness. The eye consciousness arises dependent on the eye insights. So this is the, you can't know an object with the eye unless you have an eye and there is a visible object. In the Abhidhamma, they had 2 other factors that are supporting factors, and that would be light, in the case of a visible object, and attention. So if there's no light, even though there's a physical object, so there's a person out there, but there's a completely dark room, you can't see them. If you're not paying attention, you might not see them, even though you've got a light and that person or that object is right there. But if you're not attending to that object, you won't see them. But in the sutta, it's just mentioned in terms of this meeting of the consciousness is arising dependent on the eye and sights. So without the eye and the sights, there is not any consciousness. And similarly, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. In this case, Dhamma here is translated by Bhante Sujato as ideas. It could be thought of as things that can be known, phenomena, things that can be known. So it's not just that the mind is only able to cognize an idea, like an abstract idea like E equals mc squared. That's an idea that's completely abstract, but there could also be an idea like I have an idea of my mother. And the mind can also cognize that idea. Okay, that's the third. Then we come to contact. Consciousness arises dependent on the eye and sights. The meaning of the three is contact. That's called contact. And likewise for all the six senses. You could say that the contact is the initial moment where a phenomenon can be experienced. And right after that comes Vedana, which is the initial evaluation of that phenomenon that has come to our experience. Even before you have a very clear understanding of what the object is, Vedana can arise. It's said that some things are almost like built into as almost like an instinctive reaction. So if you smell something disgusting, the unpleasantness that arises there is said to be it's before you have a concept, before you even know what it is, before you even have a thought, this is dangerous or this will make me sick or something like that. Nevertheless, you have that repulsive reaction, unpleasant. Likewise, this is something that they talk about in science class. It's said that, like a chicken is afraid of a hawk. And even a little baby chick, if the hawk flies over in the shadow, goes over, the little chick is frightened. Or even an amoeba, if you put some vinegar into the petri dish where the amoeba is living, it will run away to the other side because it doesn't like it. So that there are some things that are sort of like a built-in, or some feeling reactions that are learned because of our previous experiences. So if you had a terrible experience. This is an example I learned in science class. So there's a woman who was assaulted in a purple house. And now every time she sees a purple house, that fear comes up because the image of the purple house and the traumatic experience have become linked together in a memory. So the very sight of a purple house triggers the memory of the previous trauma. So past pleasant or painful experiences that you've had can then be embedded in the mind, so that even before you really understand what you see, the feeling can start. So 6 classes of feeling should be understood. Consciousness arises dependent on the eye and sights. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Contact is a requirement for feeling. So you won't have a feeling without a contact. You won't have a contact without a feeling. Every time there's a contact, there's a feeling, even if it's just a neutral feeling. Nevertheless, there's always a feeling with each moment of contact, and there's never a feeling without some contact. So this is the systematic way that the Buddha has set up this sequence of causation. This is for you to investigate while you're practicing the Satipatthana. Anytime that you're able to discern or notice that there's a feeling, you can try to quickly, in a way, it's like you're not necessarily able to see it just at that moment in real time, but if you just look back like a moment, just a moment before there was a contact, and you can see these things happen. Or else, if you are practicing meditation and aware of a sensation, it may be like a meditation. Touching is really important, because with the eyes closed and being in a quiet room, not during the mealtime, there may be not very much happening with all of the 5 senses, but the touch sense can become very prominent. And you may be sitting in meditation and feeling there's no feeling happening, but the suggestion is look more closely. See if there's, you can be aware of touching on the skin, or you can be aware of the touch with the movement of the body with breathing. And so what Vedana is present there. And it may be that when you look more closely, you'll discern some subtle, pleasant or unpleasant aspect, or you may discern that it's neutral. And you can develop that discernment. You can develop that perception. So the contact is the requirement for feeling, and so likewise for all of the 6 senses. I will say here that the statement that mind consciousness arises with the mind and ideas, the meaning of the 3 is contact. Contact is a requirement for feeling. So there is a bit of a synergy that's happening that can create a loop. So if you have a pleasant feeling, that's consciousness can cognize the feeling. And then if consciousness cognizes the feeling, there can be the beginning of a reaction to that. They can make the pleasantness of the pleasant feeling even more pleasant. Or if something is unpleasant, like if it was unpleasant and you didn't notice it, that unpleasantness is sort of staying at a sort of like a subliminal type of level. But then if through mindfulness, you notice that something is unpleasant, then it may seem to be even more unpleasant. because there's a contact with the mental cognition of the Vedana. And then the craving, the tanha. So this tanha, this is the cause of dukkha. So you ought to truly train the mind to have the perception of tanha when it arises, because tanha is the great danger for you. In what I read before, the tanha, it was talking about the arising in the mindfulness, talking about the arising of the internal and external sense base and the fetter that arises from that you can equate that fetter with the tanha. So when the tanha arises, that's what's keeping you tied down to samsara. It's keeping you tied in samsara. But in the satipatthana, not only do you see the arising of the fetter, you also see the cessation of the fetter. And you see the cessation of the fetter in such a way that it doesn't arise again. So you have to be able to see the arising of craving, and also the cessation of craving, and also the non-arising of craving. So if there's a feeling and craving doesn't arise, you've got to train your perception so you can see that. It says here, feeling is a requirement for craving. So dependent on feeling is craving. In this case, I think you would have to say that feeling is a supporting condition, but it's not the only supporting condition. So that craving is also dependent on ignorance. So it would be the combination of feeling and ignorance that would result in craving. And every feeling does not necessarily lead to craving, because if there's no ignorance, that feeling will not lead to craving. Okay, so, but in this case, the Buddha in this case is giving the teaching in the sense of the arising of the paticca-samuppada, the arising of the process of dukkha, which leads to rebirth. And if that's the case, then that whole situation would have started out at the beginning with ignorance or delusion, and in that case, the feeling would result in craving. So if you find that craving arises in you, even though you've been practicing meditation for a long time, studying the Dhamma for a long time, but still craving arises in you, still aversion arises in you, don't blame yourself too much. You can just remember it's because of causes and conditions. I was born as a human being. I'm not yet fully enlightened. I have not yet completely destroyed ignorance and delusion. And because of those conditions, this is why craving arises in me. And then when you see it like that, then it will be able to become calmed. And you'll be able to develop the ability to start learning how to tolerate pleasant and unpleasant feelings without being so reactive towards them. Or even you'll be able to eliminate some of your delusion and ignorance when feeling arises. If instead of going quickly into craving, if you stop and look more closely at what's happening and try to see that phenomenon truly as it really is, then you may find out that just eliminating that little bit of delusion about the wrong view of that particular moment that's caused that particular feeling to arise in you, that when you see it accurately as it is, it doesn't trigger the craving anymore. So this is the case where you saw a rope, but you mistook it for a snake, and you have an unpleasant feeling. But then you take another look, and you say, oh, it's not a snake after all. It's only a rope, so I don't have to be scared. And so that unpleasant feeling is replaced. Or if you experience somebody is speaking harshly to you or insulting you, that's a sound through the ear. And you got some immediate sensation of a dislike being activated about that. And then you look again and you look more closely, and you may realize, oh, that person just has an angry personality. Or that person is not very well educated. Or that person must be really stressed out today. And so they're just reacting because they're stressed out. So then, or else you realize these kind of quarrels have been going on all over the world since the beginningless time. It's not personal. This is just something that happens all the time, and I'm not going to be upset about it. And so when you see it, you look again and you see it differently. And that can, so this is not the ultimate destruction of ignorance, but it's it is losing a little bit of delusion about a particular moment. So this is why there's Bhante Sujata's put an asterisk after this just statement that feeling is a requirement for craving. But you won't have craving without a feeling. Okay. Now, here we come to the teaching about non-self, which is, you can put this in your notes, that this is one of the greatest, most best, concise explanations about not self. If anyone says the I is self, that's not tenable. The arising and vanishing of the I is evident. So if the I is self, it would follow that one's self arises and vanishes. That's why it's not tenable to claim that the I is self. You might at this moment be thinking, well, I never thought the I was self, so what's this about? I can bring it to you in a different way. Suppose I ask, did you exist? Do you exist? So, how do you know you exist? Seekers, spiritual seekers and philosophers and ordinary people have investigated this question, like how does a person know they exist? There's a common ordinary way, which is the natural operation of the nervous system of a sentient being, which basically is putting together or assembling all the different experiences that befall a person, and is creating an image of a subject at the center of all of that, which is then created as the one who's experiencing all those things. And it's very useful and almost necessary for a being to know about their own self, because in order to survive, you have to take care of yourself. So in order to take care of yourself, you naturally kind of know that you're a self. So if you're hungry, then you feed yourself. If you're thirsty, you take a drink. If you're cold, you get some protection for the body for warmth. If you're lonely, you look for companionship. And so all of these are happening. We're able to do it because we've got this ordinary commonplace sense of the self. And likewise, there's a kind of a social self. So I would say when I was a little baby and my mother was, talking to me, and I could see, like in her eyes, her love for me, that would make me begin to get a picture like I am lovable. Or else she would be making like statements about what kind of a girl am I? How am I different from my brothers and sisters? And so that was sort of build up a social kind of thing. Or we would have some kind of ideas about like what kind of people we are in our family. So in our family, we have certain standards. So that is added to my identity. So this comes to be like this autobiographical self is created from the social interactions. So the self that we have, our idea of self, is built up from that. All of these levels are not problematical, and the Buddha refers in a certain way, not in the way that I just described, but the Buddha very often refers to the self, ordinary self, in a context of moral things. So when the Buddha said, you are the light, rely on yourself, don't rely on anybody but yourself. Only by yourself is evil done. Only by yourself is good done. So these teachings of responsibility are referring to that ordinary commonplace sense of self, which so far is not a problem. But then there comes, and it's arising basically motivated by existential anxiety or the fear of death, the fear about the annihilation of the self. So beings would like to live a little bit longer. Most of us would. And we're afraid of something that would cause a destruction of our existence. And we can get super fearful and anxious about even things that are just detrimental to our existence. So if you were punished by the family and made into a pariah and made to sit in a corner, and why is it so scary and so upsetting? It's because it's like yourself, you feel like yourself is hurting, and so on like that. So this leads to all of the religious ideas about the spiritual self, thinking that there's some essence of a self related to God that is not touched by all of the difficulties and struggles and traumas that we experience here on earth, but something which is beyond all that, which is immune to all that, which is perfect, which is blissful, which is eternal, and which is associated with the highest good. So that's like a religious idea of the self. This was the idea that was common in the Buddhist time, and maybe in some ways less common in modern times because a lot of people are atheists these days, or they think that they're not worried about their eternal life. But actually, if you scratch the surface, the anxiety about death is still there, and people react in really weird and ways that are like much worse than undertaking one of the mature religious traditions of the world and having an idea of themselves being a child of God or having a self connected to God or something like that. Instead, they could make nationalism or sports or politics into their religion, and they could develop their identity around that. And it's much worse doing it that way. But so the self has got this religious idea, but the trouble was it doesn't really work. And this is where the Buddha, in this teaching we're going to come to right now, Bhikkhu Bodhi calls it the Copernican revolution. You know, before Copernicus, people thought that the earth was the center of the universe and the sun goes around the earth. And just so we think that the self is the center of the universe and all of our experience goes around the self. But the Buddha then is decentering the self idea. And why is he doing that? He's doing it because the self idea doesn't work, because it's not actually the truth. And because it's not the truth, then it always fails to accomplish the goal of leading to the end of suffering, leading to liberation, leading to the goal of spiritual liberation, to the highest good. There's another side which is sort of connected to the religious idea, and that's the philosophy idea. You could call a metaphysical self. So like with Plato or the ancient philosophers thought that there was some kind of an essence of each thing, so that a person or a rock or a kind of an object has an essence, which is the ideal quality, which is perfect and pure and never changes. And the actual people and chairs and rocks that we experience in this world are sort of an imperfect manifestation or reflection of that ideal reality. So they're positing some kind of an ideal reality. That's where the self lies. And then through the whole history of philosophy, that idea of the self has been increasingly challenged through the thousands of years of Western philosophy, especially. But even it's difficult for philosophers to finally break free from that concept of the self. They can question it and question it and question it, but they find it hard to break free. So this is where the Buddhist teaching comes in. So, okay, so you think there's a self, do you? You're thinking that if only you could get in touch with your perfect, pure, eternal self, which is connected to God, that would solve your problems? Okay, so where is that self? The Buddha says. Is it the I? No, it's not the I. The I is not eternal. It's not perfect. It's not blissful. Because it changes, then the I is filled with dukkha. You have to get surgery on your eyes, and even after you got the surgery, they still don't work perfectly. And then you say, are the sights? The sights are self. No, that's not tenable. The arising and vanishing of sights is evident. And this is not just that the things that you see, whether those things are long existing or not, but it's just the phenomenon of seeing a sight is something that's even much more momentary than that. What you can see is really unreliable. If you go to a court of law and you ask people to testify about what they saw, and you may know that these days that the eyewitness testimony is one of the least reliable forms of evidence, because what people remember that they saw is very unreliable. And so nowadays, people who are looking to make a just decision are looking for some material evidence to back up the experiences that people have with what they say. And it's not just that the memory is bad, it's that actually what you see is very unreliable. It's like only what is allowed to be seen in your culture is what you will be able to see. So sights are not self. And then this I consciousness, now this is where there's a tendency for when there's a clinging to consciousness. Now this is sort of going over from the six senses to the five areas. So the upadana, vijnana upadana, the vijnana, which is clinging, that kind of vijnana has a tendency to be associated with fabricating an image of a self. And that kind of vijnana is connected with fabrication of a continuity over time. This is a basic ability that human beings have, that when, like you might have seen me here last week, and you might have the idea that it's the same bhikkhuni that you saw last week, because your mind fabricates that continuity, or that it's the same bhikkhuni that you saw at the beginning of this hour. So that's a fabrication. It's something that clinging to the upadana does, but the consciousness itself, the knowing faculty itself, if you can use your satipatthana, use your mindful observation and try to separate everything that's been added, all of the thoughts and concepts and ideas that are being, and reactions that are being added to your experience, and just get to the bare nub of the experience itself. You can see the consciousness itself comes and goes. And that this consciousness, this knowing faculty, how imperfect it is. You know, when I read a sutta and I'm trying to understand it, right? So that would be something consciousness does. It would be to try to cognize the truth of this sutta. And it's like, I have it for a minute, but then tomorrow you could ask me, what did I learn yesterday? And I said, oh, it's very difficult to even to remember the things that are understood sometimes. So they're not self. So that, and then contact is the contact self? How could it be self? The contact is just a moment. It's just something happening in a moment. The self is not there. So is the feeling the self? No. The feeling keeps coming and going. You can't find it there. And then is the craving the self? Well, we're in a lot of trouble if craving is the self, because then we shall be eternally craving, right? So no, because the arising and vanishing of craving is evident. So in other words, the I, sights, consciousness, self, eye contact, feeling, and craving are not self. And now, so you think you have a self, and this is the challenge that Buddha is saying. Where is it? Where is that self? You can't find it. And in fact, these six sense bases with the consciousness is said to be, in other sutras, it's called, this is the all. Everything that we can experience is experienced by way of these six senses. So there isn't anything left over. Like you couldn't find the self in any one of these six sense bases, or the phenomenon arising from that. And so then you can say, well, yes, there's a self, but it's somewhere else. It's not something apart from the six sense bases. But that's not possible, because there isn't anything that's any phenomenon that can be experienced apart from these six senses. Then we come to the last teaching. Now he's getting, so this, he says, now because this is the way that leads to the origin of what Bhante Sujata translates as substantial reality. This is the Sakkaya. So Sat in Sakkaya, that means existing. The Kaya in Sakkaya is not only the Kaya is sometimes called a body. It's not just the material body, but it's also all the body and all of the mental aggregates that are associated with an individual. So Kaya has got a general meaning of a group. Like you could say, if you've got a school of fish or something like that, or an army or something like that, like an army corps. A corps is like a certain number of soldiers in an army. So that's what the Kaya is like. It's a group. So it's like the group, the existing group. So this is what you experience. And this is where this teaching is taking another important turn. This is why I think that Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, substantial reality, you need to add to that existence, the reality of existence, the existence of a self. And so, why do you think there's a self? Why is this Sakkaya? Why is this view? A Sakkaya Ditti is the first fetter. It's the most important fetter. When you get rid of that fetter of the Sakkaya Ditti, then the other 9 fetters will follow. And this is the most important one to get, is the first one. If you can overcome the view, which is finding an existing self within our experience, then this is the way to liberation. This is the path of liberation. This is the practice leading to liberation. So, what is this way? The Patipada, what is this practice? So the practice recommends, regard the I like this. This is what he recommends not doing. To lead to the origin of the self view, if you regard the I, this is mine, I am this is myself. Etam mama esahamasmi esame atati. The statement, this is mine, is associated to greed. So you see something that you like, you want it. The statement, I am this, is associated with conceit. There's one level of conceit, thinking like I am better than others, or I am worse than others, or I am equal to others. That conceit, which is this kind of measurement, so that's something that's arising in connection to like a social kind of a situation. So that's the idea of conceit. There is also the very last fetter, the fetter of manas, which is described as, translated as conceit, and that's a sort of a subtle tendency to still prioritize oneself as the subject of everything that one experiences. I spoke a few minutes ago about how the natural operation of the nervous system and the brain of a sentient being is to you experience all these things are happening all around us, and then the mind infers that there's a self at the middle. And you may look down and look at your own body, and feel that the self is this body is what you own. Or if it's not this body, it's something within this body. So then the last one, so this is myself, that's referring to the religious idea, the spiritual idea, that there is a metaphysical, invisible, sublime self apart from anything that you can experience with the five senses, associated with the supreme liberation, with eternal bliss, eternal unchanging bliss, associated with this religious self as essence. And so he goes through the same teaching, and then he says, how do you come to the cessation? So for the cessation of this sakkaya, you regard the I. Now, this is very important. You don't just take like something that's obviously painful. Like if I have a very bad habit and I keep causing trouble for myself because of my bad habit, and then I could say, well, this bad habit is not me, not myself. Or if you could say, like, I come into some terrible illness and the body is giving me a lot of pain because of illness, and then I could comfort myself saying, this body is not me, not mine, not myself. So it's true that so it is a response to suffering or painful experiences to have that contemplation, not me, not mine, not myself. But it's not only the things that are painful, but it's everything. So the six senses and the corresponding internal, external, the consciousness contact, that's what the Buddha called the all. It's everything. All the phenomena that you're able to experience is contained within these six senses. And all of it needs to be regarded. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. So this regard has to be comprehensive and all-inclusive. If you leave something aside, it's like my friend who said, I have loving kindness for all the beings in the entire world except for the communists, because of what they had done to her family. No. So if I say, I regard everything as being not me, not myself, not mine, except for my eternal soul, which is some invisible thing that is postulated to be within me, which I've never seen, I can't touch, I'm not able to experience it, but I learned about it in church, and so I say everything is not self, but except this one little thing is myself. Now, the Buddha is saying, no, it has to be everything. It's got everything is not self. That's the way to cessation. There's further about the practice. The I consciousness arises dependent on I insights. You can be aware of this. The meaning of three is contact. You can be aware of this. Contact is a requirement for the arising of what is felt as pleasant, painful, or neutral. You can be aware of this. When you experience a pleasant feeling, if you approve, welcome, and keep clinging to it, the underlying tendency to greed underlies that. When you experience a painful feeling, if you sorrow, wail, and lament, beating your breast, falling into confusion, the underlying tendency to repulsion underlies that. When you experience a neutral feeling, if you don't truly understand that feeling's origin, what's the origin of the feeling? Contact, right? And the condition for contact is the internal and the external sense actions and the consciousness, the triple conjunction. So you see the origin, and then you see the disappearance. So when those conditions stop, the feeling stops. The gratification is the delighting in the experience that you have. The drawback is because it's impermanent. It's going to go. That's the danger. And then the escape is the cessation. So when you see it as not me, not myself, that's the escape. This is particularly pointed out in connection to neutral feeling, because it's possible to temporarily escape from to have a seclusion from this pleasure and pain through meditation. Now, the danger of delusion and ignorance was there all the time, but once you've been able to escape from pleasure and pain by through meditation up to the fourth jhana, where the sorrow, the mental and physical, you have seclusion from the mental and physical pain and pleasure. You've got that neutral feeling, but nevertheless, you got to see the origin, disappearance, gratification, drawback, and escape from that, or else you're still in trouble. So you must, in order to develop this not me, not mine, not myself, in order to develop that view, that regard, a precondition or a way to that practice is dispelling the underlying tendency to repulsion towards painful feeling, to greed for pleasant feeling, to repulsion for painful feeling, and to ignorance in the case of neutral feeling. You've got to give those up, dispel them. And you have the training in many other places in the sutta about how to become more skillful towards the different kinds of Vedana, how to not be blindly reacting to different kinds of Vedana, but how to see through them, so that the steadiness or the clarity of your regard is not going to be pushed and pulled around as a result of the three kinds of Vedana. And so this same study, you can do this with regard to the eye insights and any of the six senses. So when the eye consciousness arises, depending on the eye insights, there is the contact, there is the arising of what's felt as pleasant, painful, neutral. When you experience a pleasant feeling, if you don't approve, welcome, and keep clinging to it, then the underlying tendency to greed does not underlie that. Or when it's painful, if you don't sorrow, wail, and lament, then the underlying tendency to repulsion does not underlie that. I'm going to take this back to the Satipatthana, which we're trying to practice during the next couple of months. This is coming over from the Vedana-nupassana, mindful contemplation of feelings, to the Chitta-nupassana, to the clear comprehension of the states of mind. So when you see that the underlying tendency to greed does not underlie that, that's when you see a chitta, which is either affected by greed or not affected by greed. Or you see a chitta, a state of mind, which is affected by aversion or not affected by aversion, not affected by repulsion. Or when you see a state of mind which is affected by delusion, or when you see the state of mind which is not affected by delusion. And likewise for the other senses. So the Buddha has here gone from somewhat like a theoretical description, like the theory of why you can't find a self, and he's brought it down to a complete, very doable, practical way of undermining the reactivity, the arousing of the greed, the craving, the repulsion, or the blindness towards our experiences. So he's given the real how to gradually, little by little, chip away at that illusion, chip away at those reactions, those reactions of repulsion and greed. So seeing this, a learned noble disciple is disillusioned with the eye sights, eye consciousness, contact, feeling, craving. That's the nibbida. When they're disillusioned, the desire fades away. That's the raga, or you could call passion. Passion fades away. When passion fades away, they're free. When they're free, they know they're free. And now they understand rebirth is ended. My spiritual journey is complete. What's done, what had to be done, has been done. So let's see if I can answer some of the questions. Welcome, Ramesh, Chintan, Orion, Sudha, Elaine, Samasiya, Christopher. The six senses create the world. Yes. Yes. The world, if the six senses are absent, the world ceases to exist. Okay, so the world of our own experience ceases to exist. The Buddha declined to get into ontological debates about the existence of the world external to what a human being is able to experience. So whether the world exists or doesn't exist apart from our experience is irrelevant and unimportant. The important thing is the world that does our own experience of the world. So consciousness creates the subjective experience. Yes. JLR, welcome, Ananaya. If the six senses are absent, does craving arise? No, it's my understanding craving is a problem for sentient beings. And sentient beings are beings which possess senses. They don't necessarily all possess six. So some of the beings in the Deva realms have less than six senses, but they all have some senses. All of them are sentient. Here's a comment from Bhikkhu. Bhikkhu is answering that question. Thank you. Welcome, Venerable. Thank you for joining this this talk. I'm delighted, and we're honored when the monastics will join the conversation. Craving does not arise if the six senses are absent. Craving is conditionally dependent on them. Yes. That's why the path emphasizes mindfulness and restraint at the sense doors. This is a very important from the training. This is like the monastic training has a very strong emphasis for those who are at the beginning of the path. One of the very first trainings is restraint at the sense doors and being very aware of those reactions coming at the sense doors. I agree with that. The three main types, kama, tanha, sensual pleasures. Tied to the six senses, bhavatanha, craving for existence, vibhavatanha, craving for non-existence, and the last two ultimately root in the process involving the senses. Yes, and I alluded to that when I talked about how our natural instinct of an uneducated person, we're trying to continue our existence for a little bit longer. And then that a delusion of the self arises from the experiences that we have with the senses. And from there comes this existential anxiety, the fear and concern, and the imagined worry about this eternal existence. Six senses absent when people get Chan 4. I'm not sure what Chan 4 is referring to. Is this understanding correct then? Is the sutta? So the I comes in contact with its object. At that moment of contact, consciousness arises dependent on all three factors: I, active contact, and a sense object. And based on this I consciousness, memory in the mind is made, and further fabrications happen. Also, how should we understand this teaching with respect to the body, verbal, and mental fabrications? So, yes, it's true that thoughts and fabrications arise subsequent to those, the actual experience. The phenomena is always triggered with the contact at the senses together with the internal faculty, the external faculty, and the consciousness coming together at the moment of contact, the feeling arising from that, and then from that feeling, then the further mental processing, not in the sutta but elsewhere, is described as perceptions and sankharas, or fabrications. So if there are underlying tendencies based on previous delusions that have been stored away in memory as different kind of associations or misguided, inaccurate ideas about the things we experience, then we would apply some biased, inaccurate, or harmful perceptions to the experience. And from those unskillful perceptions, then will arise unskillful fabrications, unskillful decisions, unskillful karma formations, unskillful intentions arising from the unskillful perceptions. But then when wisdom is present, there still will be up to the feeling point, the sense contact and so forth, and the feeling arises. And then because of the training, because of having learned to regard these experiences as not me, not mine, not myself, then would come accurate perceptions which are in accord with reality. And based on those accurate perceptions could come skillful intentions, skillful volitions, like the intention of renunciation, or the intention, as Bhikkhu was mentioning just before, of guarding the senses. So it can be either skillful or unskillful. in the end, all of the mental fabrications of the volitional formations for one who is fully enlightened becomes separated from the kind of volitions that are leading to a continued existence. So the desire for continued existence or the desire for non-existence, the mind of the fully enlightened arhat is neutral, without any inclination towards existence or non-existence, in the state of perfect neutrality. In that case, so the bhavatanha and the vibhavatanha has been cut off for the arhat, and for that reason, there are no more fabrications leading to continued rebirth. How is the teaching of the three types related to this teaching? So this is the formation of karma. So the deeds that you do, what you do with your body, is said to be like 100 times more consequential than what you did with just with speech, including talking to yourself, and then something that you only thought about. So if you think, I hate that person, I'd like to kill that person, if it's just a thought that happens in it for a minute and then you immediately reject that thought, just because that thought arose, is not as powerful than as if you talk to your co-conspirator about, let's kill this person. And then, but if you actually take up a weapon and make the effort to kill that person, you see how the escalating consequence of this is the type of karma. But the thing, all karma is related to volition. And so all karma that you do is starting in the mind. And if that karma is related to craving, if it's related to bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, or kama tanha, then it will be unskillful and lead to go around and around. But if you do something with your body, your speech, or your mind, which is not pertaining to those kinds of craving, then those fabrications are not going to hurt you. So this is why you can meditate on purpose. You can uphold your morality on purpose. You can guard your senses on purpose. You can listen to the Dhamma on purpose. And those, if you're doing those things, pure of those unskillful intentions, then those things won't hurt you. Okay. Christopher, got it, meaning no contact, we remain unconscious, the world will not exist. Yes. If you are unconscious, the world does not exist. Because contact consciousness creates the world. Yes, that's it. Even if one disavows the eye and its object and the other 5 sense bases, the experience still, yes, the experience does still continue. Even if you don't regard the eye as myself, you still have an eye and the experience still continues. And the experience still continues. And that experience is still conditioned and impermanent. Even the Buddha saw things with the eyes, and his experience of sight through the eyes was conditioned and impermanent. So the effect of an eye and a visual object is not a delusion, but the attribution of the self is a delusion. You may initially be able to realize that just intellectually, but after practicing for a long time, it can become much more intuitive. The experiences still continue. It feels like a self for one who's not yet enlightened. So the going away of the feeling that this is mine and the freedom from it, not intellectually, but I guess intuitively, yes, that's just what I said, is what gets as a result of stream entry and so on. Yes, that's it exactly. And so even you can see that the self-delusion, maybe before it was like really strong, like an immature, childish person, or like a child who is like having a temper tantrum because somebody knocked over their sandcastle or somebody took away their toy, say, oh, that's mine. It's because they don't yet know. But then if someone takes away your toy, you won't be the least bit disturbed about it because you have tamed yourself of that kind of possessiveness and greed and identification with your toys. And so on like that up until stream entry. I think Ryan's question may be the last I have time for. Resati Sampajana. Can this or any type of sati be incorporated and useful for work related to research projects, which happen to be highly interesting and deeply engaging, but exhausting sometimes? My experience is that I assume, Ryan, that you're referring to not writing a term paper or doing a research project in academia, non-Buddhist academic sense, but instead the internal investigation. So the investigation of Dhamma is a wholesome factor, and practicing with vipassana to have a continuous awareness and to direct the awareness towards certain aspects of experience where we're trying to develop these perceptions, that can be tiresome. And that's not the entire practice. That's only like one part of the practice. But then another part of the practice is more just to relax and to once those perceptions have been developed, then they become intuitive and automatic. And then one can just relax and just be mindful. Okay, so this is all of the time I have, and this has been a very perfect evening for me because it's 8:59, and I've come to the end of the time and answered the questions. So thank you all for your patient listening, and I wish everybody to have a good success with taking these ideas, whatever you were able to remember, and put them in practice with your own mindfulness meditation and your own mindfulness in daily life to see how much you can observe and see directly. You can find out for yourself whether or not this is true. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.